Picture this scenario for a second. You're stepping into a room full of total strangers, and you take a seat in a circle of folding chairs.
Oh, the classic folding chair circle. That's an intense environment right there.
It really is. The air in the room is practically humming. Like, emotions are running incredibly high, conflicts are just simmering beneath the surface, and unspoken alliances are forming with every glance.
And of course, every single person in that room is looking directly at you to somehow steer the ship.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you're navigating, a high-stakes corporate board meeting, trying to mediate a tense family intervention, or sitting in the facilitator's chair in a clinical setting.
Managing group dynamics is arguably one of the most complex, unpredictable human puzzles you can attempt to solve. Because you aren't just dealing with one person's psychology.
Right, you're dealing with a living, breathing web of interpersonal crossfire.
Yeah, when you have 8 or 10 people in a room, you have dozens of separate relationships happening simultaneously. It's not just a one-on-one dynamic.
Which is wild. And
Yeah.
usually when we talk about leadership or even therapy, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering,
Hmm.
You have a problem, apply a formula, get a reliable result.
I mean, it's a very comforting illusion. We really lean on the medical model, like broken or not broken, sick or well. We want a clean diagnostic manual.
We really do. We like things to be categorized nicely, but then you step into the world of group dynamics, and suddenly that neat little formula just completely disintegrates.
It absolutely does. You're looking at an incredibly murky landscape. It relies heavily on nuance, timing, and reading the invisible currents in the room.
It's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Right.
There's no simple x-ray for group tension. You can't put a stethoscope to a team meeting and instantly know why everyone is so defensive.
No, you really can't. Which is exactly why we're here today.
Yes, this deep dive is designed to turn you, the listener, into a master of these invisible currents. We're unpacking the foundational skills of group counseling.
And we're drawing heavily from some really seminal work here. Gerald Corey's texts on theory and practice, insights from substance abuse treatment groups.
Plus the practical frameworks from Jacobs and his colleagues, and of course Irvin Yalom's legendary strategies for group psychotherapy.
Right, and the overarching theme across all these sources is a truth that extends way beyond the clinical setting.
True group leadership is this highly delicate, constant negotiation between maintaining a rigid, safe structure and allowing for spontaneous, sometimes completely chaotic, human connection.
It's a massive balancing act. So to set the scope for you listening right now, we are moving way past the cliche of just sitting in a circle and sharing feelings.
Yeah, no kumbaya today. We're getting into the underlying physics of group facilitation, the highly technical, deeply empathetic, and strategic skills required to guide a group through intense resistance.
And, to build trust out of thin air and ignite lasting behavioral change, it requires a level of intentionality that most people never even realize is happening in the room.
Because a skilled facilitator is managing microexpressions, they're tracking silences, engineering interactions, and mapping the group's developmental stage, all in real time.
It's basically a superpower. But before we get into the granular tactics, the actual verbal interventions you can use, our sources insist we have to start with the foundation.
Which is who the group leader is as a person.
Mm.
Corey's text heavily emphasizes that a leader's personal qualities are just as critical as their academic training.
Oh, absolutely. Their presence, their courage, their sincerity. You can memorize all the theory in the world, but if you don't possess certain baseline character traits, the group will see right through you.
That makes perfect sense when you consider the psychological state of a new group. In emotionally turbulent environments, humans instinctively look for an anchor, right?
Yeah, they regress slightly. They are constantly scanning the environment for threats, looking to the designated leader to see if it's safe, which is why the sources talk about the absolute necessity of providing constancy.
Constancy. Now, when I first read that, I assumed it meant like emotional stability, just keeping your cool when people get heated.
That's part of it, but the examples in the text are surprisingly literal, very physical.
Right. I was amazed by that.
Yeah, in a substance abuse treatment group, for instance, clients are often coming from a highly unpredictable world. The group environment needs to be a stark contrast to that chaos.
So constancy literally means the leader sits in the exact same chair every single session.
Yes. It's not just an emotional metaphor, it's physical geography. And it extends to your wardrobe and your timekeeping, too.
The text actually advises against wearing a sharp business suit one day and casual blue jeans the next, doesn't it?
Exactly. You maintain predictable clothing, clear boundaries, and highly specific start and end times. If the group starts at 6 p.m., it starts at 6 p.m., whether one person is there or 10.
Because that external predictability fosters internal safety. The group learns, like, okay, I can rely on this container.
Right. And tied closely to that physical constancy is this concept of a firm identity. This is the internal anchor.
So what does a firm identity look like in practice?
It's what prevents the leader from being swept up in emotional contagion. When a group member becomes highly dysregulated, let's say they're projecting intense anger right at you, a firm identity allows you to observe that anger without absorbing it.
Wow. So you manage your own emotional life so you can remain a clear mirror for them without taking it personally.
Precisely. But here is where the sources throw a massive curveball. Despite being the anchor, texts drawing from solution-focused brief therapy advocate for something called the not knowing position.
The not knowing position. This feels like a huge shift from the traditional medical model.
It is a profound and often very difficult shift, because the traditional model is entirely hierarchical, right?
Yeah, I am the expert doctor, you're the sick patient, I will diagnose your dysfunction and tell you how to fix your life.
But the not knowing position flips that entirely. It means entering the group with intense curiosity, rather than acting as the omniscient expert who holds all the answers.
I have to admit, if I'm dealing with a group and they're all looking at me to solve a crisis, my instinct would be to give them the answer to prove my competence.
It's totally natural to want to do that.
Like if I'm managing a team at work and they bring me a massive logistical failure and I say, I don't know, what do you all think? Won't they just think I'm incompetent?
That is the exact trap amateur leaders fall into. They equate having authority with having all the answers. But it's crucial to understand that the not knowing position is not about feigning ignorance.
Oh, okay. So it's not just playing dumb.
Not at all. It is about a highly strategic distribution of power. You aren't abandoning your clinical knowledge or your years of experience.
You just apply those skills by being intensely interested in the unique, subjective world of the group members. Right.
Yes. You operate from the fundamental assumption that they are the experts on their own lives. When you act as the expert who dictates solutions, you inadvertently create a dependent group.
Because you're training them to sit passively, bring you their problems, and wait for you to feed them the fix. They don't do any of the cognitive lifting.
Exactly. By taking the not knowing position, you ask targeted, highly intelligent questions that force the members to search their own internal resources. You return their autonomy to them.
So you might have something like, in the past, when you face an insurmountable conflict, how did you de-escalate it? You don't know the answer, but your question directs them to their own historical competence.
That's a perfect example. You're guiding the discovery process. You're holding the flashlight, but you are forcing them to walk down the path themselves.
I love that. And this ties directly into the concept of modeling behavior, which all the foundational texts highlight as vastly more powerful than dictating behavior.
Right. If you want the group to take risks, drop their defenses, and admit their flaws, you cannot sit there in a bulletproof vest of professional distance.
You have to demonstrate what Adlerian psychology called the courage to be imperfect.
The courage to be imperfect. It's such a great phrase.
I interpret that as being willing to admit when you misread a situation or made a mistake right there in the group.
That is exactly what it means. If you make a clumsy intervention or you accidentally cut someone off, you own it immediately.
Like, I realize I just interrupted you and I apologize. Please continue.
Yes. By doing so, you prove to the group that making a mistake isn't fatal. You survive it, you learn from it, and the relationship continues.
And for group members who grew up in environments where mistakes were punished severely, witnessing a leader model that courage has to be a revelation.
It truly is. But the sources also warn heavily about the danger of a leader-centered group, which happens when a leader cannot let go of that expert role.
It seems like that's what happens when they won't embrace the not knowing position.
It's incredibly common, especially for new facilitators. A leader-centered group essentially operates on a hub-and-spoke model.
Meaning, the leader is the hub in the center, engaging in sequential one-on-one therapy with one member at a time.
Right. The leader asks a question, member A answers, the leader gives advice, then they turn to member B and repeat the process.
Meanwhile, the other 10 people in the circle are just a silent audience. They're merely watching therapy happen to someone else.
Which completely defeats the fundamental purpose of gathering a group together. You might as well just do 12 hours of individual counseling.
Yeah, it completely stifles the true power of the group, which is the peer-to-peer interaction, the profound realization that other people in this room share your darkest fears.
The leader's job is to decenter themselves so the group can connect with each other.
So, synthesizing this foundation, maintaining your own firm identity while simultaneously decentralizing your power through genuine curiosity, that's the ultimate leadership hack.
It really is. You stop carrying the exhausting burden of having to fix everything yourself, and you unlock the collective intelligence of the room.
And to effectively unlock that collective intelligence, we have to move from the philosophy of the leader to the actual mechanical toolkit.
Let's get right into those mechanics.
We're shifting focus to the essential group counseling skills outlined by Corey, Jacobs, and others. And this is an extensive list. We're talking attending, active listening, focusing, restating, clarifying, summarizing.
Plus, reflecting, meaning, interpreting, linking, pacing, leading, gatekeeping, blocking, and protecting. It's a massive arsenal.
It really is. And a master facilitator is constantly cycling through these skills seamlessly. Let's start with the absolute bedrock, attending and active listening.
Active listening is a term thrown around in every corporate seminar, but the text quotes Natalie Rogers, who describes it beautifully. She says it's about listening to the music as well as the words.
I've always found that to be the most accurate metaphor. The words are the content, the lyrics. But the music is the tone of voice, the micro-expressions, the bodily posture.
Right. The sudden shifts in breathing, the cadence of the speech. A skilled group leader is constantly scanning the room for incongruences between the lyrics and the music.
The classic example being someone who says, "No, I'm completely fine with the new policy," while their jaw is clenched so tight it might shatter.
Yeah, and their arms are crossed defensively over their chest. The lyrics say compliance, but the music says fury.
And attending is the physical manifestation of that listening, right?
Exactly. It's how the leader uses their own body language, leaning forward, maintaining appropriate eye contact, nodding to signal they are fully present.
Okay, so once you're attending and listening, you have to actually speak. The texts break down several verbal interventions that sound similar but serve very different functions, restating, clarifying, and summarizing.
People definitely use these interchangeably, but they are distinct tools. Let's start with restating, sometimes called paraphrasing.
This is simply reflecting back the core content of what a member just said, but slightly more condensed.
Right. It serves two purposes. It proves to the member that you heard them, and it acts as a mirror so they can hear their own thoughts out loud.
Okay, so if a member says, "I just can't stand it when my boss hovers over me while I'm typing. It makes me sweat. I feel like a teenager again."
A restatement would be, when your boss micromanages you, you feel an intense, almost physical panic. You captured the essence without parroting them exactly.
Now, clarifying is different. Clarifying is used when the member's lyrics are vague, confusing, or contradictory.
Yeah, you're asking them to distill their own experience. You might say, you mentioned feeling off lately. Can you help me understand what off looks like for you?
You're forcing them to bring abstract feelings into concrete reality. And then summarizing seems like pulling the camera back, taking a wider view.
Summarizing is an essential pacing and leading tool. You use it when a member has been talking for a long time or at the end of a session to tie multiple threads together.
So over the last 20 minutes, we've discussed your frustration with your boss, how that connects to your anxiety, and how you tend to withdraw. It organizes the chaos into a coherent narrative.
Exactly. But then the text moves into deeper territory with reflecting meaning and interpreting. And the sources make a huge point about how interpretation has evolved.
Yeah, it's no longer about a Freudian therapist sitting in a high chair, stroking their beard, and dictating the ultimate truth of a patient's subconscious.
Thank goodness.
Oh.
No, modern interpretation is deeply egalitarian. The text defines it as offering a proposal of meaning.
So you're examining the member's behavior, spotting a potential underlying pattern, and offering it as a tentative hypothesis. You do not force an interpretation on someone.
It's highly collaborative. You phrase it like, could it be that? Or, I have a hunch. Tell me if this lands for you.
You offer it up for the member to accept, modify, or completely reject.
This touches on the concept of collaborative empiricism, especially in cognitive behavioral groups. You act as a co-investigator with the client.
So if they say, "Everyone in this group hates me," you don't say, "That's not true. Your thoughts are distorted."
Right. You say, Let's look at the evidence together. What specific interactions happen today that lead you to that conclusion? You test their assumptions against reality together.
Okay, so those are skills directed mostly at an individual speaking. But how do we weave the group together?
Mm.
This brings us to linking, which Corey identifies as vital.
Linking is the antidote to that leader-centered hub-and-spoke model. It's the leader's ability to connect members who have shared concerns or similar life experiences.
If I am the hub, linking is me building the spokes between the members themselves.
Exactly. Say member A expresses a deep fear of rejection. If you're actively listening, you might remember that member B talked about a very similar fear 2 weeks ago.
Instead of just validating member A yourself, you use linking. You say, member A, as you describe that fear, I recall member B mentioning something very similar. Member B, do you connect with what member A is experiencing?
You're literally weaving a safety net beneath them. You force them to realize they aren't alone, and you train them to look to each other for support.
Now, managing the flow of these interactions requires another set of skills from the Jacobs text. Gatekeeping, drawing out, and cutting off.
Gatekeeping is a form of pacing the group. It's ensuring equitable airtime. And you run into two classic problem situations here: the silent member and the chronic talker.
Let's talk about the silent member first, because honestly, if someone hasn't spoken in 3 weeks, my instinct is to leave them alone.
Sure, you figure they're introverted and calling on them would be cruel.
Exactly. But the text suggests we need to use drawing out.
You do have to respect people's pacing, but prolonged silence can be toxic. The group might start projecting judgment onto the silent member, like they think they're better than us.
Meanwhile, the silent member might be desperate to speak, but terrified of jumping in. How do you draw them out without making them feel like a deer in the headlights?
You don't ask a massive probing question. You use observation and low-stakes inquiries. You might say, Sarah, I noticed you were nodding when David was talking. I'm curious what was resonating with you.
Well, that's smart. You give them a specific, localized entry point.
Alternatively, you can use structural tools from Jacobs and colleagues like rounds or dyads.
A round is having everyone in the circle answer a prompt sequentially, right?
Yes. It forces participation, but in a highly predictable, low-anxiety way. Like, let's go around and share one word describing our energy level today.
The silent member knows exactly when their turn is coming, and a dyad is breaking the group into pairs for 5 minutes.
Right. They only have to talk to one person, which is vastly less intimidating than speaking to 10.
Those are incredibly practical tools. Now let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum. The chronic talker, the person who sucks all the oxygen out of the room.
This requires the skill of cutting off, and this terrifies people.
It feels so rude to interrupt someone who is pouring their heart out.
It does feel rude in normal social etiquette, but a group is not a dinner party. A chronic talker is often monopolizing the airtime to avoid feeling their own anxiety.
They talk in circles to avoid getting to the painful point, or they just lack social awareness.
And if the leader doesn't intervene, the group will become resentful of the talker and resentful of the leader for failing to protect the space.
So how do you cut them off without shaming them into silence for the rest of the year?
You do it gently, but with absolute firmness. You step in, validate their core point, and redirect the energy.
Like, John, I'm going to pause you right there. You've outlined a really complex situation, and I want to make sure we hear how others relate to this feeling of betrayal. Maria, have you ever experienced something similar?
Exactly. You cut John off, but you immediately link his theme to the group. You validate the content, but you stop the behavior.
That transition is masterful. Which brings us to my absolute favorite concept in this entire deep dive: the art of blocking and protecting.
It is perhaps the most counterintuitive skill for a new leader to master, because it requires you to actively stop people from being nice.
The sources focus heavily on how leaders must protect members from inappropriate behavior. But sometimes, the most damaging behavior is disguised as extreme kindness.
Let's look at the illustrative example from the text. There's a group member named Jael. Jael is talking about something deeply painful. She begins to cry, and she says she feels incredibly exposed.
Now, what is the natural, deeply human instinct of a room full of empathetic people when someone starts crying?
To rush in immediately, to offer a tissue, to say, it's okay, don't cry, or you have nothing to be embarrassed about. We want to soothe the pain.
Exactly. It's a reflex. But the skilled leader, according to Corey's text, actively blocks this quick reassurance.
When Jael says she feels exposed, the leader stops the group from jumping in with comfort and instead asks Jael to sit with the feeling, to say more about what it's like to feel exposed right now.
which looks, to an untrained observer, almost cruel. You're letting someone twist in the wind.
Right. But it's actually profoundly helpful.
I was struggling with this, but I came up with an analogy. I think blocking in this context is like letting a cake bake in the oven.
Okay, I love this. Walk me through it.
When someone is crying and doing deep emotional work, the group feels the heat radiating from them. Their instinct is to open the oven door and let the heat out by saying, "It's okay, don't cry."
Yes.
But by blocking that reassurance, the leader keeps the oven door firmly closed. You allow the heat to stay in so the person can actually bake, so they can process why they feel exposed, rather than just being patted on the head until they calm down.
That is a phenomenal analogy, because opening the oven door prematurely ruins the cake. And we have to ask why the group is rushing in to comfort jail in the first place.
Quick reassurance almost always serves to alleviate the group's discomfort, rather than actually helping the person crying.
Precisely. The group is subconsciously saying, please stop crying because witnessing your pain is making me feel incredibly awkward and anxious.
Whoa, that reframes everything.
Sitting with raw emotional discomfort is where the actual therapeutic work happens. If the leader allows the group to pacify Jill, she learns a devastating lesson, that her emotions are too much for the group to handle.
Which reinforces her fear of being exposed. By blocking the rescue, the leader proves the group is strong enough to hold her pain without flinching.
You're protecting Jill's right to experience her own emotions without being shut down by someone else's anxiety.
So understanding these tools, linking, cutting off, blocking, how do we put them together? What is the overarching strategy?
All of these skills are ultimately deployed in service of one primary goal, keeping the group focused on the present moment.
Which brings us to Irvin Yalom's legendary work on mastering the here and now. The core concept is that a highly functioning group does not sit around recounting stories from the past.
They don't focus on the there and then. They focus relentlessly on what is happening in the room between the members at this exact second.
Yalom argues that the here and now is the primary engine of change in group therapy. Historical anecdotes are often just safe content.
The real, actionable data is the interpersonal dynamic happening live in front of you. The text outlines two essential tiers to make the here and now therapeutic.
Tier 1 is plunging the group into spontaneous, honest, emotional experience with one another, experiencing the feelings in the room.
But Tier 2 is the magic trick. It's the self-reflective loop, which Yalom also calls process elimination. This is a vital distinction.
Because raw emotion is not therapy, right?
Yeah.
If a group just yells at each other and then goes home, they haven't done therapy. They've just vented.
Exactly. They've had a cathartic release, but no structural cognitive change has occurred. Without the second tier reflecting back on the emotional experience that just occurred, the learning opportunity is lost.
So process illumination is when the leader steps in, stops the action, and says, let's pause. What just happened between you two? What were you feeling in that exact moment?
It forces the group to analyze their own immediate behavior.
Let's use the illustrative example from the text. There's a group member named Kevin. Kevin is talking, going on and on, complaining about a dilemma at work.
He's talking about his terrible boss, the unfair workload, the disrespect. He is completely lost in the there and then.
A skilled leader will use their toolkit to interrupt this content flow and pull him into the here and now process.
And how exactly does the leader execute that transition?
The text suggests the leader intervenes and says, Kevin, I sense you yearn for respect here, and I wonder if the comment a member made last week about you being thick-skinned was hurtful, and if that's related to you bringing up this work dilemma today.
It is a masterful intervention. You take the theme of his story, disrespect, and map it directly onto his relationship with the people in the room.
But I have to ask about the reality of doing this. If I'm pouring my heart out about my terrible boss, and you cut me off to ask how I feel about the guy sitting next to me, I'd be annoyed.
It is jarring. Members often initially resent the interruption. They feel dismissed.
So what do you do with that resentment?
This is the genius of the model. Yalom insists the therapist must attend to those feelings of resentment immediately, because that resentment is also part of the here and now.
Wait, so you interrupt them, they get mad at you for interrupting them, and then you analyze that madness?
Exactly. You use it. You might say, Kevin, you look frustrated that I stopped your story about work. Tell me what it feels like to have me, the leader, interrupt you right now.
Wow. You're training the group that the most valuable data is their immediate interpersonal dynamic.
Right. If Kevin feels disrespected by his boss, and now he feels disrespected by you, the issue of respect is alive and breathing in the room. You can actually work with it.
You can't fix his boss, but you can explore his reaction to feeling disrespected in real time. The text calls this meta-communication, reading the process beneath the content.
It's exactly like having X-ray vision.
It makes me think of couples arguing about who forgot to take out the trash. The content is the trash, but the process, the meta-communication, is almost never about the garbage.
It might be about feeling undervalued or feeling abandoned. If you argue about the trash schedule, you will argue forever. But if you illuminate the process, I feel like you don't value my time, you can actually solve the root problem.
So for anyone listening, understanding metacommunication is a game changer for any team dynamic.
And this relentless focus on process is what allows a group to mature over time, which brings us to the life cycle of the group itself.
Let's explore the group's journey. Just like a human being, a group has a highly predictable lifespan. We're going to focus on Corey's first 3 critical stages: formation, initial, and transition.
It is absolutely crucial for a leader to understand these stages. Your behavior, your tools, and your expectations must shift depending on where the group is.
If you treat a group in the transition stage like a group in the formation stage, the group will shatter.
Yes, completely shatter. Let's walk through the timeline. Stage 1 is formation. This is all pre-group work, pre-group interviews, screening. It's about getting the right people in the room.
Now, why is screening so heavily emphasized? Can't anyone benefit from being in a supportive group?
In theory, yes. But in practice, not every group is right for every person at every time.
Like if you put someone in an acute trauma crisis into an unstructured process group.
The emotional intensity of the group might overwhelm them and cause actual harm. Or they might monopolize the group's energy. The formation stage is about creating a balanced, viable ecosystem.
Okay, so you assemble the team, then comes stage 2, initial or the orientation stage. The text notes that members are often vague here. They hide behind a facade, or they slip immediately into advice-giving mode.
This is the polite phase. Everyone is feeling each other out, trying to determine the rules of engagement. They're asking, am I safe? How much of my real self can I reveal?
This is where that quick, inappropriate reassurance we talked about earlier happens constantly, right?
Exactly. And if you're dealing with a group in stage 2, your instinct might be to push them hard to share deep secrets.
But the sources advise a different approach, because pushing too hard creates terrifying defensiveness.
Right. The leader's primary role here is to provide structure and psychoeducation. You have to explicitly set the norms, explain confidentiality, and gently block advice giving.
You want to provide enough structure to prevent floundering, but not so much that they become completely dependent on you. You're building the container, which sets the stage for the deepest challenge. Stage 3. The transition stage, also known as the storming phase.
The text paints a pretty intense picture of this stage. It's marked by high anxiety, intense defensiveness, and a visceral struggle for control.
This is where many amateur leaders panic and abandon ship. In stage 3, the polite facade drops. The honeymoon is over.
Members begin testing the boundaries to see if the container holds. They test the leader, they test other members, they might arrive late or openly attack you. This is the critical moment. If my group starts arguing with me, questioning my methods, my natural instinct is to assume I have lost control and I'm a terrible leader.
But the literature insists that if this happens, it means you're actually doing a good job. It means we've successfully hit stage 3.
It's such a paradox. Conflict is not a sign of failure. It is an essential gateway to genuine cohesion.
Yes. Because the members are asking a fundamental, unspoken question. Can I really trust this space with my darkest, ugliest parts?
If the group is only ever polite, they don't know if the environment can handle their messiness. By picking a fight, by testing the leader, they are essentially throwing a live grenade into the center of the room to see if the room explodes.
They are testing the structural integrity of the group.
Precisely. And the leader's job is to survive the grenade.
Okay, I want to get extremely granular here.
Yeah.
How do you survive the grenade? Let's role play this. Let's say a member looks at me and says, you don't know what you're doing. You just ask stupid questions and none of us are getting any better.
As the leader, your heart rate spikes, your face flushes.
Exactly. What are the actual mechanics of surviving that attack?
The very first thing you do is manage your own physiology. Take a slow, deep breath. Tap into that firm identity we discussed. Remind yourself this attack is a manifestation of the member's anxiety, not your worth.
So I regulate myself. Then what do I say? I assume I don't defend my credentials.
Never get defensive. Defensiveness proves that the grenade hurt you, which means the room isn't safe. You use process illumination.
You lean in and say, I hear how frustrated you are with me right now. It takes courage to voice that anger. I want to know more about what it feels like to sit here and feel like I'm failing you.
Wow. You invite the attack closer. You invite it, you validate the emotion, and you process it in the here and now. You don't retaliate or shame them.
You prove that conflict can be explored without someone being destroyed.
And when the group watches the leader survive, that when they see the leader stay constant instead of crumbling, the rest of the group realizes, holy cow, it actually is safe here.
And that shared survival is what creates true, unbreakable group cohesion. But you cannot bypass the storm to get there.
You really can't. Which is why understanding your leadership style and adapting it to the specific rules of your environment is paramount.
Right, which brings us to adapting the style. Different groups, different rules.
Yeah.
The sources highlight three distinct types: psychoeducational groups, interpersonal process groups, and skills development groups.
Let's break those down. Let's start with psychoeducational groups. These are highly structured, often following a pre-planned curriculum.
The leader acts more as a teacher, focusing on content and skill building, like a stress management seminar in a corporate setting.
Your primary goal is transferring information. You manage the time tightly to ensure the curriculum is covered.
Which is the polar opposite of the second type, interpersonal process groups. Content is completely secondary. The leader focuses on the present interactions.
If a group member named George explodes at Charlie, the leader doesn't give a PowerPoint presentation on anger management. The leader asks George who Charlie reminds him of.
In a process group, the interaction itself is the curriculum. And then there's the third type, skills development groups, heavily rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy.
Here, leaders model behavior, coach, and set up role plays. But the text mentions a specific danger for the leader here: the danger of boredom.
If you're teaching the exact same communication techniques week after week to different cohorts, you can easily become disconnected.
And if the leader is internally bored, their tone of voice broadcasts the music of boredom, and the group instantly disengages.
Now, despite these massive structural differences, the text connects all of this back to the MI spirit, which stands for motivational interviewing.
The MI spirit relies on collaboration, evocation, and honoring client autonomy. It's that not knowing position again. You recognize that the final choices ultimately rest with the members.
Thinking about these different group types, it's like the difference between being a driving instructor versus being a mechanic.
I like where this is going. Break that down for me.
So if you're running a psychoeducational or skills group, you're the driving instructor. You have to teach the rules of the road, how to parallel park. You have to be directive, because if they don't know the rules, they'll crash the car.
That maps perfectly.
But if you're running an interpersonal process group, you're the mechanic. You aren't teaching them how to drive. You're just letting the engine idle and listening to figure out what's rattling.
And when you hear the rattle, the resentment, the meta-communication you pointed out so the driver can hear it too, that is a highly accurate analogy.
And a master facilitator develops the situational awareness to know exactly when to switch hats.
Let's pull all of this together. We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the foundational identity of the leader being a constant, firm presence who embraces the not knowing position.
We moved into the extensive toolkit, differentiating between restating, clarifying, and summarizing, discussing how to link members, draw out silent members, firmly cut off chronic talkers.
And the crucial art of blocking quick reassurance so true emotional processing can occur.
We dove into mastering Yalom's here and now, using process illumination to see past the safe content. We braved the transition stages of group conflict, learning that a direct challenge is a necessary test.
And finally, we explored adapting our style, always guided by the collaborative spirit of motivational interviewing.
I want to remind you, the listener, that these aren't just clinical skills. Whether you're leading a high-stakes team meeting or navigating a tense family dinner, these principles apply universally.
Understanding how to block unhelpful advice, link shared feelings, and read the process beneath the argument will give you a profound edge in absolutely any human interaction.
Which brings me to a final thought for you to ponder. We've talked extensively about using the here and now loop on groups of people. But what if you applied Yalom's concept to your own internal monologue?
Turning the X-ray vision inward. The next time you find yourself spiraling internally, obsessing over a past regret or a hypothetical future anxiety, what would happen if you interrupted your own internal content flow?
What if you stepped into the role of the group leader inside your own mind? blocked the anxious reassurance, and forced a self-reflective loop on what you were feeling in that exact immediate second.
If you apply that curiosity to yourself, you might just find that the wise, constant leader you've been looking for is already in the room.
That is something truly worth sitting with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of group dynamics. Keep listening, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the human experience. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.